Hi everybody, it's Tim with Engadget, and we are taking a look at the BlackBerry Torch 9850. This is perhaps something of a spiritual successor to the previous Storm, but ultimately it's been given the Torch name, despite there being another Torch that's also launching today. That Torch has a keyboard, and while this looks a little bit like that Torch, there is no keyboard hiding in here. This is a touchscreen only device. In fact, it has a 3.7-inch WVGA display up front, which we found to be quite bright and quite nice in most viewing conditions. Now, it has this kind of flowing, sweeping design, which BlackBerry calls waterfall. You can see that it's tapered on both ends, and the display does indeed reach, or rather the glass does indeed reach up to the top and curve all the way down to the bottom. But unfortunately, it's got these kind of ugly-looking buttons that are poking out here. These are, of course, the traditional BlackBerry buttons that you would expect, but I think in this case it might have looked a little bit nicer if they'd gone with some capacitive touch buttons hiding beneath the glass rather than kind of poking through, looking a little bit like, let's say, the grill on a Jaguar, maybe an old Jaguar. We've got the four function buttons that you would expect, as well as this optical trackpad here in the middle that you can use for swiping through menus and such. But why you'd want to go all the way down here and use this thing when you can just reach up and tap what you want, well, I'm not sure. Let's take a quick tour of the device. On the left side here we have a micro USB port. On the bottom, not a whole lot going on. Right side, we have the convenience key here, which by default brings up the camera and can be used as a shutter release button. However, we found this a little bit hard to press, so there's a tendency when you hit this to move the phone itself, which can result in blurry pictures, and that is, of course, not what we want. Volume rocker up and down, and there's a tiny little nub here in the middle that can be used for muting, and then a 3.5mm headphone jack there. Now, up on the top here, this whole surface actually is the lock button. You can see the little lock graphic there. Press this in to lock the screen, or to unlock the screen. And actually that's quite convenient to use, quite comfortable as well. The problem is it's so large that it's very easy for this to be accidentally hit when you throw it in your pocket, which can result in unintentional unlocks, which can result in pocket dialing, and we all know that nothing good can result from pocket dialing. Now on the back we have a 5-megapixel camera with an LED flash. This is an autofocus lens. Here we saw earlier that the 9930 has an EDOF lens. This is autofocus, and we found it to take fairly good pictures, but not great pictures. Push this little latch on the bottom and the back cover comes off. And here we have the 1200 milliampere hour battery, which delivered quite good battery life. Perhaps not great battery life compared to earlier Blackberries, but again, quite good. There's a micro SD card slotted in here. A 4GB micro SD card will be provided by default, and that matches up with 4GB of internal storage. And then there's a SIM card, which is tucked underneath here as well. Okay, now, this is BlackBerry OS 7, which you may be thinking looks an awful lot like BlackBerry OS 6, and that's because it was at one point a point release of OS 6. Ultimately, there's not a whole lot new that's going on here, but we'll give you a quick tour around. Tap here to do a universal search across the entire device. And as you type, it filters down things and brings in contacts, documents, applications, and pretty much anything else that is on the device. You can also now tap here and do a voice search. Voice search on the BlackBerry Torch. Search research on a BlackBerry Torch. Pretty good. We've actually found it to be very accurate in most tests. That was maybe asking a bit too much of it, but we did find in general that voice searching is quite good. But maybe don't say the word voice search. Now let's check out the browser, which is new and exciting. And bring up our own web page. Performance here is quite good, as you'll see shortly. There we go. It's rendering quite quickly, and ultimately it's reasonably good to use. It's certainly on par with the best mobile browsers on other platforms. Quite responsive for pinching to zoom. As you can see, you also have the bounce at the top of the page, and there's bounce as well at the bottom. If you scroll quickly, it's very easy to get yourself the dreaded pre-rendered grid bit there, but ultimately it's a nice browser to use. The problem that we found is that it does still default to the mobile or the WAP view of pages in many cases, which is a little bit unfortunate, but ultimately most pages it's not too difficult to find your way to the full desktop rendition. Other than that, not a whole lot shockingly new in this operating system, and that is probably the biggest disappointment with this phone. BlackBerry OS 7 feels a lot like BlackBerry OS 6, which already felt rather dated to begin with. And ultimately, we think it's time for RIM to come out with something new, with some new software to go ahead and match the quality of its new phones. The 3 phones that were launched today, in general, are quite good, and this one I think is also quite good. But ultimately, you have to remember that this is a BlackBerry and this is a productivity device, and especially with something of a dated operating system on it, you're going to be using this for getting work done. And if you're going to be using it to get some work done or to be doing a lot of messaging, chances are you're going to want a keyboard. And the lack of a keyboard here is, well, a little bit disappointing when you can get the 9810 Torch, which is only a little bit thicker and has a full keyboard on there. So again, this has been Tim with Engadget, and you're taking a look at the BlackBerry Torch 9850.